the Florida Writer Podcast, a discussion about writing and other things.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast with your host, Allison Nissen. And today I am lucky enough to be with Mark Newhouse. Mark, could you give us a 60-second elevator pitch about who you are and what you write?
Sure. Thanks for having me today. I really enjoy, getting to talk to readers and certainly getting to talk to you. My name is Mark Newhouse, and I am the FWA Youth Chairperson. I'm also a member of the Board of Directors. And recently, my most awarded books were called The Devil's Bookkeepers. They won the Gold Medal Historical Fiction Award, and they went on to win Published Book of the Year from the Florida Writers Association Royal Palm Literary Awards, and recently were named the Best Fiction Series in the Chanticleer International Book Awards. I also write for children, so I guess I'm sort of Jekyll and Hyde. I've got a split personality.
Looks like you forgot about the Hemingway First Place for Wartime Series. That's quite an impressive title. Hemingway First Place. Wow.
The funny part about that is I didn't enter that contest. So the judges actually must have put it in. And yes, we won the first place on that, and they went on to win the grand prize. I'm also proud that we won the Eric Hoffer Book Award, first place for historical fiction. The books have done remarkably well, considering I consider myself a children's writer, and I really didn't know if I could tackle something this challenging.
What's the biggest difference between writing for children and writing this sort of series?
Well, I've loved writing stories for adults, but writing for children is just fun, and it makes me feel like I'm a kid again. And I really love it because, well, there are a lot more rules when you write for children, but there's nothing like a child telling you, "Oh, I loved your book." That to me is the best feeling on earth.
Have you had the opportunity to interact with a lot of children who have read your books, many books?
Actually,
I've read some of them.
Actually, yes. My mystery series, which is called The Defenders of Monstrovia, I had one kid write me that now he wants to be a lawyer, because what they are is they're mysteries built around Perry Mason and Sherlock Holmes, who were my childhood idols. And so I incorporated them into making Jasper Doofinch, the lawyer for monsters and fictional characters in Monstrovia. But my favorite time was I got a fan letter from a little boy. He had read my Rockhound Science Mysteries, which kids love solving the mysteries by doing fun science experiments, like making orange juice ice pops. So this little boy wrote me and he was about, I guess, maybe 7 years old. And he wrote that Rockhound was his favorite person on earth. The only thing is, Rockhound was a teenage dog detective. And then he asked me a bunch of questions about writing, such as you're doing. And he finished off with one classic. He wrote, "I know all authors are rich. Can I swim in your pool?" I thought that was great. And I wrote back to this little boy, "If I had a pool, I would be happy to invite him, but I'm just happy to share my work with him." And I've used that kind of like my closing line whenever I do a presentation.
That's great. Oh my goodness. How much your heart must have sung when you received that letter.
When it's funny, when you interact with kids, they're more, they're very open about their feelings. And I actually had one little girl come up to me after reading my Midnight Diet Club, which is about bullying, because I was a bullied child, so I wanted to help kids who were being bullied. And she wrote that my book helped her against her bullies. And I actually had tears in my eyes with that one.
Wow.
Yeah, the rewards for writing for kids may not be financial, but there are many others. When you go to a school and you meet kids who have read your books, and it's like you're a movie star, and they hug you and they thank you. And, adults don't do that when you write about the Holocaust.
Well, writing about the Holocaust is a heavy, heavy series. I want to ask how you've marketed your books. So is it different to market to adults and children?
Yeah. One of the things that I do to market my books, honestly, is I enter contests. I entered the Florida Writers Association Royal Palm Literary Awards. And the first year, and I think you probably know the story, but the first year we were finalists for book one and we didn't win. And it's so important to be open to the suggestions of others. And the judges were fantastic. And one of them said, the book was about 600 and some odd pages. And the judge said, well, it drags a little bit in the middle. So I thought about that and I cut the book in half, and the following year we entered it again. And the rest is history. We won the first place historical fiction and went on to win the Published Book of the Year award. Okay. So that's one thing I do. I think the awards you receive, when you put them as a seal on your book, it gives you a sort of validity, because remember, these are independently published books, as opposed to the big 5 publishing companies. The other thing I do is I don't think of myself as selling books. I sell myself. And when I do a workshop or a podcast, I don't say, please buy my books or tell people about, that they should buy my books. What I'm hoping is that they will be interested in me, like me, and maybe get interested in learning more about what I write. The other thing I do is I'm on Facebook. I'm very, very grateful. I have 1,000 of my former 6th grade students on Facebook with me 21 years after I retired. Some of them are in their 60s now, Allison. And I think that's a remarkable thing. But the other thing that I do is I go on Facebook groups that I really love sharing information with and learning from. And every once in a while, someone will ask me about my Holocaust books, because I'm fascinated by what I did not know about the Holocaust until I started writing them.
When you're on the Facebook groups, I'm always curious. When you're on these groups, do you bring up the fact that you've written these books, or do you just have dialogue and then people will look at you to see who you are?
What I do when I go on Facebook groups is I ask myself how I can be of help. For example, someone may post something that is about the Lodge Ghetto. One of my Facebook groups is called Descendants of the Lodge Ghetto. And so what happens is when they ask a question, if I can contribute, I contribute. And then sometimes someone will say, I don't know very much about the Lodge Ghetto. I knew nothing. My parents never spoke to me about their past. And I was born in a displaced persons camp 2 years and 1 day after my mother was freed from Auschwitz, but they never really spoke to us about it. So I try and say to them that I wrote the books mainly for my children, so they would know what I did not know, and my grandchildren. And no one was more surprised than me that they've become so popular. In 2 years, we've received, over 350 reviews on Amazon, which is incredible. Absolutely incredible. Anybody who knows writing knows one of the hardest things about writing is getting people to read your book and then reviewing. And I don't ask people for reviews. It's their passion and their emotional, have they been touched emotionally by the books that gets them to write the reviews. And some of those reviews, again, bring tears to my eyes. It's been an incredible experience.
Wow. I love the information you're sharing with us, and the idea that we reframe the idea of marketing so that we can be helpful rather than selling books. But how can we help?
Someone once asked me a question, because I know people don't believe this about me, but I'm an introvert. Most writers are. And it took me a long time before I could say to someone, I'm an author. And usually when they hear author, they run the other way because they think you're there to sell a book. Well, a famous author said to me once, Don't think of it as selling a book. Ask yourself why you wrote the book in the first place. Well, basically, you write a book to entertain, which is a positive, to help people learn something new, okay? Maybe to inspire people, to share something you care about. So you're doing a service by having them read your book. And if you think of it that way, you can feel more confidence in what you're doing. And that's what I tell people when they ask me, well, how do you sell your books? I don't sell books. I sell a service. I sell myself, and I try to help people. And I think that's the most important, thing I do for selling books.
Let's talk about planning. I know you have a very popular workshop called Practical Planning for Books and Stories. How do you plan a book such as your Devil's Bookkeepers series?
Yeah. The Devil's Bookkeepers forced me to change my modus vivendi, really, my way of operating, because I was pretty much a pantser. Okay, I would create a story and I'd get to the end of it and I'd say, oh my God, it doesn't work. Well, if you saw my workshop, which is a pretty simple, concept really, and it doesn't take very long, you will see 4 very simple planners that I had to use for the Devil's Bookkeepers because I had so little confidence that I could finish the books. And for example, the first thing I did really was ask myself, well, what's a conflict that the main character has to have? And then I circumvented the next logical step. I said, well, how do I want the book to end? Once I did that, I had a target for my book, and everything else becomes a challenge for the MC, the main character, to get to the target. If you do it that way, you have a much better chance of success than if you fly by the seat of your pants. And especially for a series, when I started the book, I thought it was going to be one book. When it became a series, I knew I had to keep track of my characters because the characters have to be consistent. And the locations too. One of the things that I figured out was that I had to treat locations almost as characters. When you walk into Rumkowski's office, no matter when in the trilogy you are, you must see that office in the same way or you won't believe the book. And that's very, very important. And you must see Rumkowski the same way. Rumkowski, by the way, is not the main character in the book, which is another very important point. He was the ghetto leader, and he's a real person. And his strategy was so drastic. He created his own police force to try and save 200,000 Jews trapped in this ghetto, including my parents. And he used his police force to brutally put down any hope of resistance to the Nazis, put down labor unions, and he turned the ghetto, which was a terrible slum in Poland, into a manufacturing hub for the Nazis to try and save them. Today, he's one of the most vilified leaders in all of history. And yet he saved my parents. So I leave it up to the reader to decide. But in my planning, if he was not consistent, people would say, well, I don't believe this is a real character. And he was very real.
Someone once told me that every character has to have a little bit of motivation. Do you do that? So this main character, this character that you have, did he also have motivation that worked towards the end, the outcome of the novel?
More important than motivation is that every character you create has to make readers care. Now, when I say care, that doesn't mean they have to necessarily like the character. But if you look at some of the characters that we do like, such as Hannibal Lecter, why do we stay with him? He's a horrible person. You know, he would not want to be, I would not want to be his best friend, but he's a fascinating character. And that makes us care about what happens to him. In my novel, one of the hardest things was that I decided to write the novels in first person, which brings you very close to a character. But I chose a character, if you think of your characters as sitting on a pyramid and your main character is at the very peak of the pyramid, there's not much room there. Other characters may knock that character off the pyramid. So when you invest your time in creating a character who's not perhaps as strong as the villain in the piece, you've got a big risk you're taking. Okay. But I try to make people feel for the character. The worst thing that you can do to a main character or any character is have readers be indifferent to that character. So yes, there has to be motivation, okay? And that's part of the planning. You ask yourself, why does the character do these things? And then you make sure that you make it something plausible.
I'd like to have you spend a little bit of time talking about the Florida Writers Youth Groups.
I would love to. I've been the chairperson of the Florida Writers Association Youth Program for about, I think it's about 5 years now almost. And it's been one of the most rewarding experiences I could have ever asked for. Basically, it follows the Florida Writer Association motto, which is writers helping writers. And in this case, young, aspiring writers. These kids have tremendous enthusiasm. They have tremendous curiosity, and they're just fun to work with. Unfortunately, the last, 2 conferences had to be canceled. So we had to, think out of the box and come up with new ideas for them. And one of the ideas we came up with is an online writing club, which meets on the 3rd Wednesday every month on Zoom. And our host is our 19-year-old youth representative to the Florida Writers Board of Directors, Michael Farrell, and he's terrific. And our co-host and my very great assistant is Paula Feuerstein, who has a wonderful attitude and was an educator, and also loves working with these great kids. It's fun. We have guests who come in, talk to our kids, and we share with them the hot tips about writing, publishing, and marketing. And I just enjoy it.
Mark, how can people get in touch with you? How can they find out information about the Florida Writer Youth Group? F-Way.
Yeah, F-Way, yes. Join the wave with F-Way. Yes, that's correct. One of the things you can do is go right on the Florida Writers Association website, and all the information is right there. The other thing you can do is you contact me directly. And the easiest way of doing that is at www.newhousecreativegroup.com and use the contact form to get in touch with me, and I'll be happy to get back to you. We love volunteers. Hopefully, once COVID is over, we'll be able to restart personal groups within schools and public libraries. And that's a tremendous amount of fun.
And if people wanted to find out more about your books, they can also go to group.
You can learn more about my books at newhousecreativegroup.com or on Amazon. I always advise every author I work with to get an Amazon author page, and as well as a Facebook author page. Those are 2 things that I think are extremely important in this day and age. And I hope that people who, hear me on this podcast and learn about my very interesting past will say, wow, I'd like to learn more about the Lodge Ghetto and how people survived. I will tell you, Allison, of 250,000 people trapped in that ghetto, in less than 5 years, only less than 5,000 survived. And my parents were 2 of those people. My mother had a big family, 7 brothers and sisters, and only 1 brother and sister survived. I never met my grandparents on either side. And so when you read the book, the thing is so shocking of what human beings could do to one another. That's incredible. The covers of the books are actually photographs I recently discovered of my mother's sisters and of my mother holding me as a baby in a displaced persons camp. And, I know you can put splashier covers on there, but it was my tribute to them because I don't know where they died. I don't know, there were no tombstones. There are no monuments. So this is my way of keeping their memories alive. I will tell you that the stories are not stories about death. The gas chambers don't really appear in the books. They're stories about love and survival and hope in a time of terror.
Definitely a time of terror. Mark, are you ready to switch to our rapid fire questions?
Sure.
Number 1, how did you meet your significant other?
Oh boy. Well, I met Linda, who is 4'11" tall and a Brit. And if she was a general in the English Army, we'd still be a colony. I met her at a discotheque on Long Island 2 weeks after I was separated from my first wife, who happened to be a wonderful person. And we got married on the 4th of July, 39 years ago. It's been fireworks ever since.
How awesome. What's been one of your failures and what did you learn from that?
One of my failures is a constant thing. I have a tremendous problem with self-confidence. I know some people are fooled by me, but that has always been a problem. And to be honest with you, when I first, I started writing The Devil's Bookkeepers because by accident, I discovered the chronicle of the Lodge Ghetto. And I was sitting on the floor reading it. And one of my favorite movies is 12 Angry Men, which is a black and white movie, but it's just a phenomenal film. It's about 12 men locked in a room debating a jury verdict of murder. And one man turns the tide on the verdict. Anyway, as I was sitting on the floor, the idea kept circling in my head, 12 Angry Men, 12 Angry Men. This story of the Lodge Ghetto, which I did not know, and which is just recorded in these chronicles, I kept saying, this is what you should do with this. And I kept saying, I can't do it. I cannot do it. And for 3 days, I argued with myself. And then I finally said, you know what? I'm going to force myself to do it. So it's that lack of self-confidence that has kept me back for many, many years. And I'm glad in this case that I decided to tackle this project.
Self-confidence. So many people have to battle that one. Our third question, if you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
Kindness.
Kindness.
I would really, there's a reason why I have 1,000 of my former 5th grade and 6th grade students on Facebook with me. And I don't think it's because I was the smartest person they ever met, but I think they knew I cared. And if anything ever happens to me, okay, I'm hoping most people will say, he really did care. That's why he did F-Way. That's a volunteer position. That's why you and I are on the board of the Florida Writers Association. That's why you were president. That's why I've helped hundreds of people write their books without collecting one dime. If I leave this planet, okay, the one thing I want people to say is that he cared, he tried, and he never gave up.
What a wonderful send-off for the end of this interview, because Mark Newhouse, we do care and we do know that you are kind. Thank you so much for sharing your stories with us and your inspiration.
Well, thank you very much, Allison. I've got to say, I've enjoyed working with all the board members of the Florida Writers Association. Anyone who really cares about children, cares about literacy, cares about writing, should really get more involved with the Florida Writers Association and with local writing groups. I could not have done this without my writing groups. I have to thank them so much for giving me the confidence to do these crazy things. Thank you, Allison, for having me here today.
Well, Mark Newhouse, we are very glad that you were able to stop by. You have been listening to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast with your host, Allison Nissen. Allison out. Woo! We're all done. Mark Newhouse was born in Germany 2 years after his parents were freed from Auschwitz and Buchenwald. His parents came to America with him as a baby after losing most of their family in the Holocaust. His novels, The Devil's Bookkeepers, won the Gold Medal Historical Fiction Award and then went on to win Published Book of the Year 2020 for the Royal Palm Literary Award. Book 3 won first place for the historical fiction in the Eric Hoffer Book Awards, and the series recently won the Hemingway First Place for Wartime Series and the Grand Prize Fiction Series for the Chanticleer International Book Awards. For more information about Mark, visit him at newhousecreativegroup.com. For more information about the Florida Writers Association, visit us at floridawriters.org.